Beyond the darkened mirror, Elena stood in a dimly lit room, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the frame of an ornate mirror. The frame was carved with intricate designs of vines, faces, and symbols that seemed to shift in the flickering candlelight. The glass of the mirror was dark, almost opaque, like a pool of black water. She had found it after years of searching, following the cryptic clues left in her late mother's journal. The words that haunted her were etched on her mind. To face the truth, step beyond the darkened mirror. Elena opened the journal in her hands. The pages were warm and fragile, filled with her mother's handwriting and sketches. One sketch depicted the very mirror before her, with a note beneath it. The mirror shows what lies within. Her mother had always spoken in riddles, her words layered with meaning that Elena had struggled to decipher as a child. Now, with her mother gone, the riddles felt like the only way to connect with her. Taking a deep breath, Elena stepped closer to the mirror. As her fingers touched the surface, the glass rippled like water, sending chills down her spine. Before she could hesitate, she stepped forward and the world around her dissolved. Elena found herself in a strange, otherworldly landscape. The ground beneath her feet was smooth and reflective, like a mirror. The sky above was a swirling canvas of purples and blacks, dotted with shifting points of light that resembled stars. The air was cool, carrying a faint hum that seemed to come from the world itself. She turned in a slow circle, taking in the surreal beauty and the eerie stillness. Ahead of her, floating shards of glass hung in the air. Each shard was like a window into another place, showing fragmented images of memories she recognized. She saw herself as a child, laughing with her mother in their old kitchen. The memories felt close yet distant, as though they belonged to someone else. As she approached the shards, one of them grew larger and enveloped her. She was no longer in the strange landscape, but in a vivid memory. She saw herself as a child, sitting on the floor of their living room. Her mother knelt beside her, holding the journal and speaking in a gentle but serious tone. "One day, you'll need to be braver than you ever imagined," her mother said. "This mirror will guide you when the time comes." Elena watched as her younger self nodded solemnly, not fully understanding the weight of her mother's words. The memory faded, and she was back in the reflective landscape. Another shard floated toward her, its surface shimmering. As she reached out, it pulled her into another memory. This time, she was a teenager standing before the same mirror. She remembered this day vividly. Her mother had tried to explain the significance of the mirror, but Elena had been too afraid to face it. She had walked away, leaving the room and her mother behind. The memory shifted, and Elena saw her mother in the same room, arguing with a shadowy figure. The figure's voice was deep and distorted, and their words were unclear, but the tension was palpable. Her mother clutched the journal tightly, her expression fierce and protective. Elena's heart ached as she realized how much her mother had been shielding her from, how many battles she had fought alone. Back in the otherworldly landscape, Elena stood still, her mind racing. The shards around her began to move, circling her like planets orbiting a star. Each shard represented a piece of her past, fragments of truth she had been too afraid to confront. But now, she felt a surge of determination. She needed to understand, to see the whole picture. The shards converged, forming a large mirror in front of her. This time, the glass was clear, and she saw her reflection staring back at her. But it wasn't just her reflection. The figure in the mirror looked stronger, more confident, and there was a calmness in her eyes that Elena didn't feel in herself. It was as if the reflection was showing her not who she was, but who she could become. "The answers are within," Elena thought, echoing the words from her mother's journal. She reached out and stepped into the mirror once more. "You've come far, Elena," her mother said, her voice warm and full of pride. "But there's one more step you must take." Elena knelt beside her mother, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm ready," she said. "I want to understand." Her mother placed the journal in Elena's hands. "The mirror reveals not just the truth, but your potential. It's up to you to embrace it." As her mother's image faded, Elena felt a sense of peace wash over her. She was back in the reflective landscape, but this time it felt different. The air was lighter, and the stars above shone more brightly. She looked at the journal in her hands and saw that the pages were no longer blank. They were filled with words and images, a guide for her journey ahead. Elena turned back toward the mirror, which now stood tall and clear in the distance. She walked toward it with purpose, her steps confident. When she reached it, she saw her reflection once more, but this time it was just her. No illusions, no distortions, just her. As she stepped through the mirror one final time, the world around her dissolved into light. Elena found herself back in the dimly lit room. The candlelight was steady and the air felt calm. She looked at the mirror, now an ordinary piece of glass, and smiled. The journey had changed her. She felt stronger, more certain of herself and her path. She placed the journal on a nearby table and turned to leave the room. As she stepped out into the night, she felt a sense of freedom and clarity she had never known before. The darkened mirror had shown her the truth, and now she was ready to face whatever lay ahead.